YouTube! We're here on the Studies channel to discover and learn about the local culture of the OCG. Also, you've got the nice, cozy, comfy cat cam here to keep yourself entertained. Meow, 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 meow.
A very common complaint towards Konami is that they keep printing cards and designing too many bulk unusable cards where there's nowhere to play them. And to be fair to Konami, it has been getting better on an infrastructural level TCG side. With the advent of Genesis format, there's a company-supported format that has frequent balance changes, communication, and a lower-level power meta. That is magnificent.
Now it should be good.
And I hope they continue to do that for as long as possible. However, I think this has the potential to obfuscate a cultural problem within the TCG, or not necessarily a problem, but just something that's worth thinking about. Please bear with me because I'm having a really hard time wording my thoughts on this one, but I think in general, the TCG player base has a more difficult time playing the game in a way that is not exclusively the most competitive way possible. And I guess my issue with the...
Okay, but that is probably true, but at the same time, Konami put no effort into making other ways to play Yu-Gi-Oh! It's been over 20 years, and we've just now gotten a real alternative to ranked. I keep calling it ranked, because Macedo Brain. To advanced, and that's Genesis. Which in my opinion personally doesn't like actually fix any of the issues. But you know, it's only now that they are trying to do things to make other ways to play the game. The Yu-Gi-Oh players themselves also, weirdly enough, just haven't come up with their own commander. Magic's best format is a fan-made alternative to advanced, and weirdly, Yu-Gi-Oh just doesn't have a fan-made format that's super popular. So I wonder why that is. But let's hear how it is in OCG.
The Genesis solution is that since this is a company-implemented shift, the interest for this is a little bit artificial since there is an incentive to play it in prizing. And that means that the culture TCG side has not changed. Genesis is excellent, but I'm worried if Genesis were to stop getting support one day, then the players will just stop playing decks aside from the meta, which will greatly hurt less serious players, and it doesn't have to be that way. So I'm going to describe the general culture of playing the OCG because it is genuinely vastly different. My experience playing in the TCG was that you would drive to locals maybe...
I mean, I think, like, not being able to pick up a box and play with it is really bad, right? Like, that's just, in my opinion, pretty bad product design. I don't know why they gave up on battle packs and things like that, but I think that's a massive issue with it. Because you can't just go buy a product and play it out. I mean, I guess you could pick up some structured duels. The new legendary deck stuff is kind of cool. But I guess for whatever reason in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's just not normalized, and it's just not like a standard way to play. It really is just play the modern metagame or don't play Yu-Gi-Oh! And I guess that's just what happens when you have 20 years of what's the word? Engineering in a form of modern advanced constructed as the only way to play. Whereas in Magic, I think the game has always had alternative formats. So naturally an alternative format came to be quite easily there.
Once or twice a week, pay the entry fee, and then play those games. I only played 2 years of TCG, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but that was my experience.
Oh yeah, reducing pack bloating.
Here, or it is.
Why does TCG get 20 more cards than OCG? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Why are Yu-Gi-Oh packs statistically the most bloated packs in all of trading card games? 9 packs per booster in a 100 card set? You end up with like some absurd number of like 87% of your cards are like duplicates in a booster box. Sorry, in a case or something. And all of those cards are useless. Like, it's the product itself is just not good. It's just not good product. It's just toilet paper for the most part.
There are tournaments in locals,
Magic is way worse. No, Magic is statistically not worse.
A lot of people, and I would even...
There's a whole ass video on this. Like, Magic product might have its problems, but it's not as bad as Yu-Gi-Oh! When it comes to chaff. Excess, you know?
Say the majority of people here play. When I first returned to China,
that's just
I
math.
spoke to my friends that I had met at locals and asked what tournaments there are, and they were confused why I would even want to enter those. And that really surprised me because I didn't understand what other alternatives there were. If you come from the TCG, it is a given that you enter locals or tournaments. Otherwise, you're just going to be a DB or MD warrior. It turns out that there are a massive amount of players in the OCG who just walk into the store and then ask people to play at all times of the day, irrespective of events. And I really do mean at all times of the day. I didn't start work until September, so I had about a month before I started. And then during August, I was camping locals every single day. Like starting from noon, there are just people there in the shop trying to play games. And honestly, now that I've been back for a while, I'm a little bit confused how that's possible because they're not at school.
You guys ever walked up to some of the locals and just had a friendly? Like with a stranger? I don't think I've ever done that. I feel like I did that maybe in like 2015 or something when I first started out. Like, I feel like that's not standard, you know? Never done that before. Where you going? Where you going? No. He's leaving.
Or work, but it happens. It's just
You
a
get
thing.
off my mouse, Tantan.
The ultimate practical effect of this is that since players play outside of events, it means that there is a culture of players that will play the game irrespective of pricing and irrespective of how competitive your deck is. It sounds a little bit cheesy, but it really does feel like, to me at least, that people play here a lot more for the love of the game. So to go into more detail, it's very common for people to walk into locals with several decks and then ask around for opponents and also ask what decks people brought. And then players will self-power pair based on deck choice. A very common conversation would go something like, hey, do you want to play? I'm playing Goatee today. And then I would just respond, oh, sorry, I only brought Malice today. And it's because of this self-power pairing.
That's yo, that's disrespectful. Sorry, I can't afford to give you the time of day, Goatee player. Sorry, I'm on Malice. I don't play with peasants.
Casual environment that people bring all sorts of different decks, and you get so many pet deckers. In previous videos, I spoke about how there's so many pet deckers, and that's why you walk into a local in 2025 and you see Tri-Brigade Sprite or Dragon Link, Adamantipator, Goatee, Purely, Lab, or whatever. It's why sometimes I sit down and I play someone having never seen an archetype before. I played some guy who was playing a deck I didn't even know existed, which was apparently called Dual Avatar. The field spell summons these tokens, and then he just ended on 2 fusions. So then I asked him why he didn't link the tokens, and apparently he's fusion locked. Honestly, if he just wanted to start cheating,
why didn't you make a link
I
monster?
don't understand how it's possible that people pick up decks that are truly this terrible, but that's actually just how some people here are. But I could never imagine someone in the TCG trying to go to locals with Dual Avatar, especially because they're paying money to enter the event, and then they're going to be mostly playing against the meta. The reason this is all possible is because decks can survive when you play against things that aren't the best decks in the room, and this isn't necessarily true if there isn't this casual and self-power pairing culture in the TCG. And this is so special because not only is this another way to play for other players, but for me personally, Rogue versus Rogue is when you get some of the funniest game states in Yu-Gi-Oh! I always
Weird,
bring this up
yeah.
because it is the most hilarious thing I've seen in Yu-Gi-Oh! To date, but a Runic Stun player is playing against Kashira, and then the Kashira player makes Mindhacker to try and reverse deck out the Runic Stun player. Like, only when you get a massive amount of these casual deck players will you see things like this. I'm not saying that this never happens in the TCG.
That's not
I'm
like
sure
that
there are
weird though,
people
right?
who
Wasn't
bring
that like
the
a
bullshit to
genuine win
locals.
con when the deck
But
was
the
at
scale
full
is
power?
smaller. The culture is very
Mindhacker deck
different,
out?
and anyone who has played in both will tell you that this is true. For me personally, I really feel like if I didn't move back, I probably would have just stopped going to locals had I stayed in the TCG. Because, like, okay, I rightfully got flamed for saying this last year. I am not old, but I'm 24, and yet again, I'm making a video on my birthday, which means that I'm getting older. And I don't think I could maintain the motivation to drive 40 minutes to work and then 40 minutes back as opposed to just hopping on a metro. From my office to locals is 7 to 9 minutes from work. When I first moved back, I entered a lot more events, but there's only so many times I can spend 7 hours to win a deck box or some sleeves. I don't really enter local tournaments anymore either. I just go to locals and play with people. If I'm trying to test for a larger event, I can sit down with my testing group and we can get games way faster that way and also recreate game states to collaboratively figure out how to play out situations, as opposed to the TCG where I have to look up when the locals is being held and then only go during that specific time. So why is that the case? What makes it so that East Asia has both such a strong casual player base and one...
I mean, isn't this like a question of geography, right? Like in a concentrated area within, because I believe he lives in like East China somewhere. Sonny, where does he live? It's like a big metropolitan city, and it just has like 3 or 4 local card shops within like a 3-mile radius or something, right? So, in the TCG, especially in America, I mean, my God, like you have like some really spread out like places, you know, like Americans be talking about going to locals. It's like, oh yeah, I live in a close locals. It's only like an hour drive away. Like, what do you mean? Like, that's a different like country from where I am. So you're just always gonna have like a thriving community at all times of the day because it's so central and it's so like concentrated and dense. But it's weird though, because even for me, like my closest locals is like a 7-minute train ride. I could maybe take like a 20-minute car ride as well in like good traffic to a different local. But I don't think that shop is just open except when there's tournaments, basically. So I don't know. You just you go, you show up for your tournament, you play your tournament, and you leave. Like when I think back to when I was a student, maybe like in between like classes, sometime if there was a big gap of like 3 hours, I'd maybe go and hang out at locals and see if there was anyone there. But it wasn't like busy. I'm just thinking out loud here, sorry. It's just interesting how different things have gone, even for me personally.
That is extremely active without events. I'll go over 2 structural factors that I think aren't the real reason, and then finish with the factors that I think are real. To start off with the 2 fake reasons, the first one is price. The TCG does cost more money to play, but that's mostly true in the context of playing meta decks. If you're trying to play a casual deck, it doesn't really cost that much more money, and I would even argue it's cheaper for North Americans and most Europeans. If we're using
if you want to play a rogue deck in Yu-Gi-Oh, like
you can
US, you can play for like
in most states
$20.
is less expensive than spending $10 for Melodious in most
like
East Asian cities because our average income is much lower.
Like
so if you're trying to buy
play a rogue
decks,
deck in Yu-Gi-Oh.
I would be very surprised if the core came anywhere close to $50 and is often less than half of that with very few exceptions such as Lab. So I don't think the cost is the reason people don't play these casual decks as often as the OCG. The second fake reason, in my opinion, is the casual tournaments. So last video, the Floodgate one, I talked about how we have 2 different types of tournaments in China, points tournaments and for fun tournaments. There's a pretty reasonable argument to make that this tournament structure causes this cultural difference. But I do think it's actually reverse causal. I believe that because we have casuals, more casuals, that created a demand for these types of free-to-play casual tournaments with special rules because many of the players that play casually don't enter any tournaments in the first place. If the casual tournaments created the player base, then it would make sense to me that they would continue to enter these tournaments rather than the opposite. Now I'll transition to what I consider to be the top 3 most important structural factors that actually stop casual culture in the West. So the first one is the raw quantity of locals. The last time I mentioned this, I got flamed a little bit because the example I showed in my video was Akihabara, and yes, obviously Akihabara is going to be the most amount of locals out of anywhere, but the place I live also has...
Yeah, I mean, that was the point he was making, was like, look how many locals and how busy it is in the OCG. And the type of players that go to these ones, like, that was the entire... Oh my
20
God.
or more locals within a 30-minute metro ride of me. I just didn't use a screenshot of my location because I didn't want to dox myself. It is very normal for you to have easy access to a locals no matter where you live in a big East Asian city, as opposed to some cities in the US like Boston, where Yu-Gi-Oh! Locals are borderline extinct. The zoning laws in the US just make it a lot harder for there to be many locals. In North America, zoning laws are essentially exclusive, as in they'll assign 1 or 2 purposes per zone.
What is he
While in
making?
Japan, for
I've
example,
never
zoning
seen this
is
Memento
inclusive
combo
because
before,
they
by
tend
the
to
way.
tolerate anything that is up to a minimum looseness level and allow anything under that. Basically, there is just less land available for someone to open a small business since rent is higher, and that land zoned for commercial and non-industrial use tends to be farther away from where people actually live. The second is public transportation. Now, just to preface, I want to say that I love every single country.
Please don't
I've
scratch
ever
my
lived in, and
monitor,
I consider
1010.
each and every one of them to be one of my homes.
He's trying to... No, you
However,
can't touch the
public
terahertz.
transportation in
Stop.
North America is respectfully pathetic. I actually had an opportunity this year to go back to...
Wait, what's pathetic?
Each and every one of them to be one of my homes. However, the public transportation in North America is respectfully pathetic. I actually had an opportunity...
Okay, dude, we can't have a Chinese person talking about North American infrastructure and transport, all right? That's like comparing a 2025 city to like a 1940s small state. Like that's the reality. America is gonna piss some people off. I don't care. It's a third world country with a Gucci belt, dude. I'm sorry. The public infrastructure in that country is non-existent.
this year to go back to Montreal and also New York to see my friends for the first time in 3 years. And Montreal and New York are two cities with some of the best public transportation in all of North America, and it is still not excellent. Not only is it extremely slow, but it is also inconsistent. I took the subway in New York, and the first day I stepped in, there's a guy threatening to kill every single person in the car, and people are just laughing at that. Okay, actually, that's not really fair because it's not really related to public transportation, but also my metro card was because they had to stop the trains for some reason. So,
Dude, he goes to one American locals and he's being death threatened on the train. Yeah, I don't know. China's built differently.
I was late to Gamers Choice Locals.
Hey, please don't do that.
This is supposed to be the best metro in the entire US, and it is definitely far superior to something like the T in Boston, which is borderline unusable. The number one thing that bothers me about traveling to North America is since I do not live there, I don't have a car anymore, and that means I can't get anywhere. It is so frustrating. I'm pretty sure that Europe is better, the tube in London is actually okay, but it's still nowhere near as comprehensive or fast as the metro in Chinese cities. If you have never...
Okay, London is probably the best public transport system in... maybe not the West altogether, but the London tube is genuinely like S tier. It's up there. But I don't know. China's probably better, to be fair.
Never been to an East Asian city, and I'll just say you've never experienced good public
Paris is
transportation.
better. I've used Paris. It's basically the same.
Just go to locals all the time, as opposed to bigger
They're
cities
both
in East
pretty
Asia,
good.
where we can just metro to locals whenever you want to play anything. No, for these problems, I'm mostly just describing what is in reality. I'm not saying the U.S. should just fix its public transportation. Obviously, they can't really do that for a variety of reasons.
No, do it for Yu-Gi-Oh, please.
The cost of improving public transportation is much higher than just building new public transportation because all of the people that would need the New York subway to go to work would just get destroyed.
What is
As opposed to
Memento,
China,
man? This
which
is like
industrialized
so
very late
stupid.
And thus has very new technology for its public transportation when it was building it. The population that needs public transportation the most is less wealthy, which means they have less political influence. And Americans already have car culture, so it's not really a high priority to fix it. And then there's also large car companies that are lobbying against better public transportation. It's kind of a...
This video is getting way off track. He's very based, by the way, extremely true. Agree with everything he's saying, but I'm just saying, like, this video is... I do not want to read the comment section, is what I'll say. Like, you're gonna get some very butthurt, personally offended people about this stuff. Anyway, the thing is, I'm not actually completely certain that public transport is actually the main reason. I think it really is just like a main cultural issue. I've lived in cities in Europe that have had like, pretty fantastic public transport infrastructure. I've lived in near Cologne in Germany. I lived in Sweden. Sweden, one of the best like tram systems in Europe as well. And it's the same idea with the local culture. It's like no one really just jams games for fun with like pet decks and rogue decks. People just kind of show up specifically for the tournament. Deutschbahn is ass. I mean, it's pretty good when it's like not on strike. The Deutschbahn is pretty good when people aren't like, shutting it down. But when it is working, it's decent. But anyway, no, it's okay. You're talking to a British person here. Anything is a step up from fucking ScotRail. So yeah, like obviously getting to locals easier and more convenient would definitely be a massive help. But I do really think it is something to do with the intrinsic nature and culture of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how we've grown up with this game and the type of games that are encouraged in Yu-Gi-Oh! And it's all kind of centered around playing the best deck. And it would be really cool to just have pet decking take off a little bit more in the game. I would love that, obviously, more than anyone, but I don't know. I don't think... I don't have an answer. I don't have a reason for why this is this way. There's a lot of contributing factors, like he's mentioning. But most importantly, I don't know what like the solution is. Genesis is trying to alleviate that. I mean, how is the local scene now? Do people go to locals just to play Genesis for fun? Is there Genesis-specific tournaments being held? Do people go to locals and just take out their backpack and it's like, oh, do you want to play Genesis? Do you want to play, I've got a 1,000-point deck. I've got a 500-point deck. Like, is that a thing? Are people doing that? Not from what I hear personally. So I don't know.
Unfixable, to be honest.
Why is there a hand cam?
Is that
are you blind? What do you mean, why is there a hand cam?
East Asia than the West. And a lot of people are naturally introduced to Yu-Gi-Oh! If they're into anime because they're deeply tied communities, which means that Yu-Gi-Oh! In the East is so big and so mainstream. I've brought this up before in older videos, and there's always comments that say, I just don't understand how big anime is in the US. That might be true, but I was there recently, and I still think many Westerners just don't know the scale for how big anime is in the East. I agree that anime is getting more mainstream in North America, but it is still nowhere near East Asia. Even the Western countries that love anime the most, such as France, don't have as much as we do. If you've been to Japan, obviously anime is massive. Everywhere you go, you will see it. It advertises for local infrastructure. The JR line in Tokyo is
It's like normal. That's just it is
hasn't.
just it's I'm trying to think of like an equivalent, but the way that anime is like part and parcel of the culture in like Japan is I don't know, it's like Goku being like a national icon in the same way that like the Christ the Redeemer statue is in Brazil. It's like that. Genuinely, it is that level of ingrained into the society. Everywhere I went in Japan, literal just normal Japanese businessmen, because I had this like Yu-Gi-Oh thing that I was wearing, and I'm clearly not Japanese, and they would just talk about Yu-Gi-Oh. I went to this restaurant with some other guys, and we were just sitting down, and the way it's kind of weird actually, but kind of interesting. In Japanese restaurants, you don't get like separate tables. If there's a big table and it sits 6 people, and there's like 3 of you and 3 of some other random group of people, they'll just put you there. You just sit next to each other. And you just sit facing each other, and they're complete strangers. And every time we would strike up conversations, and they would ask, they like, oh, Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! And they would tell us this story about how they used to play Yu-Gi-Oh when they were younger, and how they were like obsessed with the Pokemon cards and all this kind of stuff. And it was like every time without fail, whenever I'd go out to a restaurant in Japan, these random Japanese dudes would just strike up conversations and like ask questions about how Yu-Gi-Oh is in the West, and what like how did you get into it and all that stuff. Like it's so normal. I mean, obviously this is my very limited experience, but that's how it was. Whereas in the West, like anime is still kind of like cringe in some sense. It's still kind of perceived as like niche. It's not like standard. It's not like normal. Obviously, it's gotten way more accepted in the last like 5 years, I'd say. But it's definitely a little bit more ostracized than it is ingrained into the fabric of the society itself.
Anime girl as the mascot. Love Live is essentially the mascot for Numazu, which is a literal city. And in China, it's the same. For context, I left China in 2014, so if you're like me and you left China a little while ago, you probably may be surprised. But back in my day, you had to go to specific areas in order to find anime stuff. And now you can't avoid it if you try. If you go out to eat, there's a high likelihood you'll hear anime music. There's limited random collaborations with all known chains. So for example, when I go to Dairy Queen, there's like random Hatsune Miku or Skip and Loafer collaborations. Cosplayers are also everywhere. I work 6 days a week. And then when I go to work in an average week, I will say there is almost a 100% chance that I'm going to see some cosplayer on the metro sometime that week. My mom actually asked me why there's so much cost now. Like, it's so big that even my mom knows what it is. When I walk to work, I see giant billboard signs that wish Itadori happy birthday. And most importantly, we have way more gacha culture than the West. I think this is the true crucial reason, because TCGs are not.
Oh yeah, this is it. This is the reason. The gacha culture is like why it's so much different. Yu-Gi-Oh and playing games with intention just makes more sense over here, whereas over there it's like opening random packs, buying random boxes, random boosters is just like kind of just super normal. I think a lot of people here are kind of averse to it because just buy the singles and all that kind of stuff, but I think this is the one.
They are here. So you can almost expect people, my generation, early 20s, to be into something that has random purchases because it is just that omnipresent. Again, my experience is limited to bigger cities, and I'm not saying everyone does this, but if you socialize with people in their early 20s, I'd say it's very likely you will find people who buy gacha products. My friends I met at the gym or coworkers in office buildings buy these things. These are people who almost seem like the opposite
Gym bros buying booster
but
packs.
They still like to buy random goods. To emphasize how big Yu-Gi-Oh is, I was at a company dinner, and then my coworker exposed me. He said, "Oh, do y'all know that Sunny is a world champion for Yu-Gi-Oh?" I can feel my
Wait, is he? What?
my face burning up. I've never been so nervous before in my entire life. I don't consider myself socially awkward, but I like to keep my private and public life separate. And I'm just having all these thoughts like, will they think I'm not taking my job seriously? I can't even explain this away because if you search for me, you won't find it since it's Edison, not actual worlds. I honestly thought that was it for my job. And then my other coworker's daughter actually says, oh, I play too. I play with my friends during lunch. What deck do you play? I play Draco Tail. And I'm just unlocked because I can't tell if it's better that someone else plays or if it's worse because I have the same hobbies as a middle schooler. Anyways, I'm not fired, and in fact, my coworkers thought it was a good hobby to have. I'm only telling the story just because it is literally that big. But it's so obvious that Yu-Gi-Oh players here are just massive weebs. Ignoring the anime accessories, there's a reason a ton of Chinese players can just play in Japanese if they want to. Like sometimes I'll be playing and then my opponent will just be like, これが俺の力, Demon Smith Requiem Koka. Like,
yep.
Alright. I don't really know why you suddenly started LARPing in Japanese, but sure. Yo.
Yeah, this happened to me in Germany, dude. Yeah, I was playing against this Germany. Was like, Auf Wiedersehen, das ist dein Cut auf der Friedhof. And I was like,
it just seems like players are very happy, and to an extent, I do think that it is due to structural reasons. It is
didn't happen. I made that up.
To have that casual player base. But I think even when I evaluate the conditions of the West, there is the possibility to enjoy Yu-Gi-Oh! The way many do over here. Because let's be real, Genesis does let you play more decks that are otherwise underplayed. But just using the example from earlier, I would be very surprised if anyone was busting out Dual Avatar in Genesis. It is still a competitive format at the core, and there's naturally going to be a strong meta at the top. I think that these lower power decks that never got played or outdated decks are a really fun way for casual players to experience Yu-Gi-Oh! And the player base doesn't need Konami to start that gameplay. It could be done as long as the player base itself starts playing more casually. Or not. Maybe TCG players are happy the way it is now with Genesis. I don't know, because all of my TCG friends are competitive players. I just want people to start thinking about these things, because a lot of what I enjoy more about the OCG is due to our player culture, not anything that Konami has done specifically for the OCG.
Well, that's an interesting one. I think he hit the nail on the head with the Gacha introspection. I think is really what it comes down to. And for whatever reason, like in the West and Yu-Gi-Oh over here is just so much more optimized. It's so much more competitively skewed for our mindsets. And I don't know how you change that. Alternative formats work. Maybe the future is like Genesis. But at the same time, why is there no like big commander boom for Yu-Gi-Oh like there was in Magic? This alternative format, player run thing that just took off and is doing really well. I don't know. Why has that never happened? Why has that not been a thing? Interesting question. Because you would think it would be expected, but I guess it's just like Yu-Gi-Oh players all have a different interpretation and a different view of what alternative Yu-Gi-Oh should look like. Some people want draft. Some people want ranked light, aka Genesis. Some people want, 4-player like Dominion or whatever they could domain. Everyone just has a different idea of what it should be. Because it's not player run. It's not organic. Are you talking about Commander? Because Commander started as a player tournament thing. As a player format. And then ironically enough, the Commander ended up taking off. And now they have incorporated Commander as part of the PSCT in Magic. They make Commander products, you know? Sunny outing himself as the youngest Yu-Gi-Oh creator on the platform. 24? 24? The mental image of Sunny getting best of 5 by a middle schooler running Draco Tail. When I was in China, people would lay out their backpacks on the floor in the mall and use it as a table to play if locals was packed, and this wasn't even tournament day. They just want to be able to play. I think one key distinction too is that some locals don't give out actual prizing for tournaments. There's less incentive to spend extra money and try to win at all costs when you get little to nothing for winning, and the priority shifts to trying to get as many games in as possible. I think this might be also one of a big thing as well, right? Because nowadays, like, how much does it cost to enter a tournament? I think it's like £7-8 where I live, which is like $10 minimum. just to enter a tournament, and then it's like, what am I getting? Some OTS packs if I do well, and it just feels like, well, I'm gonna be wasting my money. I'm gonna be basically like wasting my time if I don't try and win and get something out of this. But at the same time, from a local business level, it's like, well, you gotta make money. You gotta keep the lights on. Can't have people play like 30 people in your shop playing for free, spending no money. I suppose. And I think ironically, the biggest margins for card shops is like essentially just being like a nerdy like restaurant. I think is where like a lot of money comes from, is either food, and those kind of provisions, or if they have like an online store and they sell singles, which I don't even know if that's very profitable anymore these days for Yu-Gi-Oh! In the US, I see people get upset over facing rogue decks and telling their opponents they have no business playing their bad decks in a tournament because there's an entry fee of $5 and a small amount of pricing on the line. Grr, my opponent has cards I need to read. I'm from Chile, and there was always the reputation of some locals being for casuals and others for meta players. That's the exact same here. There was like, literally, like the peak of Yu-Gi-Oh! I think pre-COVID or something, or just after COVID when everything reopened, there were 2 locals on the busiest street in my city, a 15-second walk from each other. Literally, store, other store, other store, other local. And literally, it was perceived, this is the competitive one, this is the casual one. That's so weird. I moved to Canada. I was investing in Malice already, so I managed to transition from my 3 trap trick to Malice throughout the year. But if I hadn't moved, I would be having 10-minute matches where I ended the day 0-3-4 weekly. I saw the few I saw playing non-meta decks move to some meta flavor or stop showing up. Oh, and nobody shows up in different days, only the day of organized play and exactly at the hour. There's some chatting after the matches. We compare OTS pulls and trades, which I really appreciate. But whenever it comes to the actual gaming part, it often feels I'm going to tease locals as training grounds for the other players to test their next build for the regionals or nationals. To add, nothing wrong with liking the meta. I play Malice though, but there's something to say when the same community that asks for more diversity in Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the community that constantly looks how to play like Josh for a locals with a center field and card sleeves on the line. Me when I know one competitive player. First political video from Sunny. It's justified because NA got too much car and big oil lobbyists. Oh, shit! Do you think he's deleting comments? Because there's no backlash on this one. East Asia's approach to playing in stores outside of events and self-balancing is similar to how Commander functions in Magic. Not gonna dox myself, but having a local nearby in Europe is like having a unicorn. One of the main reasons I never had a chance to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Growing up outside of fan sims was because the 3 closest ones are 30-minute drive by car each, so when I go, I do often play competitively. I live right next to a very touristic city, and there just isn't space there for people to gather and play casual games, save for initiating something yourself, like renting out a space in the local library, which is another blocking factor. I'm really curious what city this person is talking about. Hoffman? Probably Germany. Hope you keep doing these. It's cool hearing about the OCG culture, which is usually a blind spot for TCG players. I am jealous on so many levels. The point about playing on stores bringing multiple decks is very correct here. In here, SEA, Southeast Asia, we would go to OTSs just to chill, even when there's locals or ranked tourneys happening. Bringing multiple decks just to play with is also a great way to train, and lab decks overall. I think a lot of it is just to do with like the profitability for our locals. I remember going to locals, and they would have a tournament running, and maybe a group of us would be like, nah, I don't really want to enter today. We're just going to play some games among ourselves. And, like, the staff in the store, the staff in the store would kind of just be, like, clearly upset by it because, you know, we're not spending money on the tournament. They would even, like, on busier days be like, okay, well, you know, you need to leave because we need more tables for the people actually playing. Which, I mean, I don't know, maybe to some extent that's fair, but it's also like, yeah, there just isn't, at least from my experience, that culture of, yeah, let's just go to locals and play some games. You know? This is the mentality we have about Commander, my locals. Unfortunately, no matter how much I try, the same mentality doesn't transfer to Yu-Gi-Oh! And I was originally mainly a Yu-Gi-Oh! Player. The reality of Yu-Gi-Oh's anime popularity in the West is that it's not popular at all. 90% of people that know about the anime only know the first series and refuse to engage with anything past it or actively reject the idea of there being more Yu-Gi-Oh anime series, whereas in Asian countries it seems more likely people to embrace and accept all of the anime series and experience most of the game, just taking interest in the game when Blue Eyes gets support like Western anime boomers do.
Brazil!
Yeah, that feels like a good point. I think that the anime Yugi boomer average mentality in the West kind of just boils down to, are we getting the next, like, DMG swimsuit rare type thing? Yes, no, okay. I'll collect it, and I'll go to locals, I'll buy a box or a case for that set, and I won't show up for months. That's kind of what I've seen from collectors, quote-unquote, from the West, generally. Chonks, Boris, thank you for the 15 months. Alright, say goodbye, Tantan. Bye-bye.